Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about a sequel to a classic 80s film that some might not even view as a classic, but more so a cult classic, I guess. And that's Weekend at Bernie's 2. So that's right there. This is the sequel to Weekend at Bernie's. Um, this came out 4 years after the first one, I think. 1993, I think, is when this film came out. But in Weekend at Bernie's 2, it takes place almost immediately after the first film. And it's about two business friends from the first movie that did witness the whole, Bernie being dead, playing off of, him still being alive for those who didn't know that he was dead kind of a thing. So they turn him into this morgue, and they think kind of life is going to get back on track for them after the events of the first film. They go back to work only to find out that they've been fired. People think that they really did have a big connection to why Bernie is dead, and why he could have been murdered, or why whatever the case was as to why he's not here anymore. So basically, they do find out about this money stashed away, like this really big amount of money stashed away in the Virgin Islands somewhere that Bernie had. And if they go there and if they have him present with them and to kind of sign the papers and everything like that, they can have that stash of money to themselves. That's something that they can use either to find new jobs or to find a new place to live. So they really want to take advantage of this. So they go back to the morgue. They retrieve Bernie, in secret. They don't want anybody to know that they took him. And so they basically try to find a way to bring him to the Virgin Islands to try to get this money that they heard about, and either clear their names, find a new job, find a new place to live, all that kind of good stuff. But while they're there, someone else knows about this money too, and these two guys know of these voodoo magic spells that can even take a corpse and make them dance to certain kind of music when they have a radio with them present and stuff. So these two friends from the first movie have to avoid having these voodoo guys take Bernie, because if they do, they could get this money first, and they could want to use the money for all the wrong things if they get the money themselves. So throughout the course of Weekend at Bernie's 2, they're trying to have fun on the Virgin Islands while also trying to get money from Bernie's secret money stash, while also trying to avoid these two voodoo guys that want to use Bernie and his money stash for all the wrong reasons. So overall, guys, I enjoyed Weekend at Bernie's too. I understand, it's not the greatest sequel ever made. I can kind of see why people really didn't like this one as much as the first one. That seems to be the general consensus with this movie. But like the first film, it's fun. It's kind of aware of how absurd the whole thing is. It does take advantage of the fact that Bernie is dead, and a lot of people really don't know that that's the case. But I do think the whole voodoo thing kind of adds a little something special to this movie. It's not better than the first movie. Let me make that loud and clear. I think Weekend at Bernie's, the first one, is way better than this one. But I think the whole voodoo approach adds a fun layer to the sequel. I think that's what keeps it fresh and keeps it going and keeps it from being a giant retread of the first movie. And there's just tons of things about it that I really enjoy. So let's go over some positives and negatives of this movie. First and foremost, I think I liked the funny and creative ways that they kept Bernie in the story. For Weekend at Bernie's 2, when you first go in, it's like, how can they do this? Are they just going to keep the whole thing of Bernie's dead and we have to make him look alive still? But they find ways to kind of work around that. They do things in this movie that Bernie really doesn't have to do a lot for people to kind of think that he's still alive, like putting him in a chair, or carrying him on their shoulders, or because now he can dance a certain kind of music, it almost looks like he's um, moving around and dancing to the music himself and going to places himself and stuff like that. So I like how this film finds ways to kind of keep the whole Bernie story going, and why it's important that Bernie's still in the story for Weekend at Bernie's 2. I also like those goofy Voodoo Hunter guys. I thought they were funny. I kind of liked when things were going wrong for them, kind of the substitute things that they had to do. Like there's a scene where they need like a chicken for something to make Bernie do something, but they can't find a chicken, so they find a pigeon instead, and all this other stuff. I just thought they were funny guys. I thought they were really funny in the story, that they were goofy, and they added another layer of fun to this movie. So I like these two rapper Voodoo Hunter guys that these two lead characters had to avoid in this movie. I also like how the film continues both the business and the beach setting that the first film had. I think it's kind of cool when a sequel can do that, where it can kind of take all those settings that you're familiar with in the first film, continue them in the second movie, do something different in the second movie, add something new, do something different with the story, while also kind of making sure that it's aware of what franchise it's a part of. I think that's something really good for a sequel to do. That's actually something that the Karate Kid Part 3 did that I thought was really good, is they continued the story, they kept the familiar elements, they kept the familiar settings, but they took it in an interesting direction. So I think that was something that Weekend at Bernie's 2 also did well as a sequel. There's also an island girl that the Jonathon Silverman character meets. That's this character here with the, well, they both have scuba masks on, but that's him right there. He was also in the film Mannequin, for those who saw that. He meets this island girl that, what's kind of interesting is that she's not really a love interest, but they kind of have a friendship, I guess you can say. She's clearly not impressed with the kind of person that the Jonathon Silverman character is. But I liked how she kind of helped them out. She had a good understanding of voodoo. I liked the use of this character. I liked how it wasn't just another throwaway love interest. She kind of added something to the story and helps them out in ways that they didn't know they could get helped with in this movie. Also, one thing that the first Weekend at Bernie's film did, that for those who saw my review of that one, that I didn't like, the use of voice dubbing and ADR in that film I thought was really bad. And Weekend at Bernie's 2, thankfully, it's way better. You can definitely tell somebody probably said something before they even started making the second one, because the voice dubbing and the ADR recordings are way, way better. They're light years better. So in the scene where they're far away or they're in the water or doing something absurd that would have been too hard to have a microphone close to these actors, they thankfully found a way around that and made it sound better. So huge thumbs up to the sound crew in this film. You guys had a much better sense of sound than the crew in the first Weekend at Bernie's film had. Or if it is the same people, they got better. They got better over the course of 4 years between the first one and the second movie being made. But for my negatives of Weekend at Bernie's 2, and why I think the first Weekend at Bernie's film, for me personally, is a little better, some of the voodoo moments are a little lame. I am going to admit that. It's creative in certain moments. I like the Voodoo Hunter characters themselves, but some of the voodoo stuff is a little hokey. There's something that the... actually, I apologize. So the guy I was bringing up earlier, that was Andrew McCarthy. I'm going to actually be talking about Jonathon Silverman for this next one. So that's him right there then for this next point I'm about to do. The point I was bringing up earlier was for the Andrew McCarthy character. So I apologize about that for those who are really listening closely and probably are going to make a comment about that soon here. So there's a moment regarding him in this film that he gets like sick or something like that. And so they have to do something really absurd for him to not reach this illness that somebody put upon him for the voodoo magic. Once again, really lame. There's a lot of moments like that. It was like, really, they had to go that way for that kind of thing. So wasn't a big fan of certain voodoo moments, but I liked the Voodoo Hunter characters, just not some of the moments that they had to be placed in. Also, there was a lame and hokey business villain in this film. There's a scene where he's trying to kind of fit in and see what these two guys are up to, because he worked for the same business that they did, that they got fired from, and he's trying to see what they're up to and stuff. Really lame character. There's a scene where he's trying to fit into the environment, and he's like doing this with his camera, and it's like clearly he's not fitting in very well. So it's just like, I felt like they could have wrote the character out, or have him stay in the U.S. for when they're there, but when they reach the Virgin Islands, just write his character out. That's the direction I would have preferred with that character, but I thought it was kind of hokey to have this character in the movie. I also thought the ending was a little too open. There's just so many questions I had at the end of this movie that they either suggested a Weekend at Bernie's 3 that never got made, or it's just a little too open. The first film ended in just the right way, where they could have done a sequel, but they didn't have to. This ending of this movie just felt a little too much like, hey, we kind of want to make a third one, but we kind of don't want to make a third one. It had that kind of attitude to it, where they weren't really sure what kind of vibe the audience probably was going to feel by the end of this movie, so they kept it open for a third, but like, no, we don't really know. So I didn't like how the film just felt so unsure about where the story was going to end for sure, that they kind of just gave up on itself. So overall, Weekend at Bernie's 2, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. It's a really enjoyable sequel, a fun continuation of the first Weekend at Bernie's. Not quite as good as the first Weekend at Bernie's, but there's just enough moments to keep it fresh, to keep it sequel worthy for another story of this nature to happen with these characters. but some of the voodoo moments, the hokey business villain, and the open-endedness of the ending did kind of hurt this film a little bit. But like I said, it's a very enjoyable film to watch. If you like the first Weekend at Bernie's, give it a shot. I think you might like Weekend at Bernie's too as well.